Some mysteries have explanations. Others leave us with questions that refuse to disappear.
And those are the stories we're looking for.
You're listening to Mysteries Unanswered.
A haunting Horror Tales original.
You know, Sam, there's something I've always found interesting about the world's greatest mysteries. Most of them don't actually begin with anything mysterious. There's no strange light in the sky, no ghost ship suddenly appearing out of the fog. Nothing like that. Usually it's just a normal day. And that's exactly how one of the Bermuda Triangle's most famous mysteries began. December 5th, 1945. 5 U.S. Navy bombers were sitting on a runway in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, preparing for what should have been a routine training mission.
Okay, wait. You said 5 bombers? Like 5 separate Navy planes all flying together?
Yeah, 5 of them. They were TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, and together they were known as Flight 19. There were 14 men aboard the 5 aircraft. And you know, there wasn't really anything at the beginning that screamed, something terrible is about to happen. They were supposed to fly out over the Atlantic, complete a navigation and bombing exercise, and then come home. That's it.
See, that's what makes stories like this creepy to me. Because those guys probably weren't thinking about danger at all. I mean, this was training. They probably figured they'd be back in a few hours.
Exactly. And for a while, everything seemed pretty normal. Flight 19 took off shortly after 2 o'clock that afternoon, but then, somewhere over the Atlantic, something started going wrong. Radio messages began coming in that suggested the flight's leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, wasn't sure where they were.
Wait, wasn't he an experienced pilot?
He was, and that's one of the reasons this story became so famous. Now, there's been a lot of exaggeration over the years about exactly what Taylor supposedly said, so we have to be careful here. But what we do know is that the flight became disoriented. Taylor apparently believed his compasses weren't working correctly, and there was confusion about the flight's actual position.
Okay, but they've got 5 planes. Couldn't one of the other pilots just figure out where they were?
You'd think so, right? And that's where things get complicated. Some of the pilots apparently had different ideas about their location. The weather was getting worse. Daylight was disappearing. And if you don't know exactly where you are, flying in the wrong direction over the Atlantic can make a bad situation much, much worse.
Yeah, because every minute you're flying the wrong way, you're getting farther away from land.
Exactly. And eventually, the radio transmission stopped. Flight 19 never returned.
All 5 planes?
All 5.
Wow. Okay, so obviously the Navy had to send people out looking for them.
They did. And Sam, this is where the story gets even stranger.
Oh, come on. There's more?
Yeah, because one of the aircraft sent out to search for Flight 19 disappeared too. Yeah, and this is the part of the Flight 19 story that, honestly, makes the whole thing feel even more unsettling. After the Navy realized the 5 bombers were in trouble, they launched a massive search. And among the aircraft sent out was a PBM Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 men. It took off that evening to search for Flight 19, and then it disappeared too.
Wait. So we're talking about 5 planes already missing, and then one of the planes sent to find them disappears. I mean, Tom, come on. I can understand why people started thinking something really strange was happening out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine hearing this story back then. 5 military aircraft disappear together. Another aircraft goes looking for them, and then that aircraft doesn't come home either. But here's where we have to separate the creepy version of the story from what the evidence actually suggests.
Okay, because I'm guessing there's an explanation for that second plane.
Well, possibly. The PBM Mariner had something of a reputation. These aircraft carried a lot of fuel, and there had been incidents involving fuel vapor fires. In fact, mariners had even picked up an unfortunate nickname because of that risk: flying gas tanks.
Flying gas tanks? Okay, yeah, that's not exactly the nickname you want for the plane that's coming to rescue you.
No, definitely not. And here's something else. A ship in the area reported seeing what appeared to be a large explosion in the sky around the time the Mariner disappeared. There was also reportedly an oil slick spotted afterward. So it's entirely possible that the rescue aircraft suffered some kind of catastrophic explosion.
Hmm, Okay, so that one might not be quite as mysterious as it sounds. But what about Flight 19? Because we've still got 5 Navy bombers missing.
Exactly. And that's the mystery at the center of all this. Search crews went looking for Flight 19 over an enormous area. Aircraft searched from above, ships searched the water, but they couldn't find the 5 Avengers. No confirmed wreckage, no definitive discovery of the aircraft, and no answer that could tell the families exactly where those 14 men ended up.
See, that's the part that's actually sad when you get past all the Bermuda Triangle stuff. There were real people on those planes. Families were waiting for them to come home.
Yeah, and I think that's important to remember. Because Flight 19 eventually became a legend, but for those families, this wasn't some spooky story. They lost husbands, sons, brothers, people they loved. And the fact that the aircraft weren't recovered left a question that people would keep asking for decades. What actually happened out there?
So, okay, let's talk about that. What's the most likely explanation? Did they run out of fuel? Did the weather take them down? Was it navigation? Because something had to happen.
And this is where it gets really interesting because there's a theory that doesn't require anything supernatural at all. It starts with something surprisingly simple. Lieutenant Taylor may have thought he was somewhere that he wasn't.
Oh, okay. So if he got their location wrong,
He could have led all 5 planes in exactly the wrong direction.
oh, that's bad.
Very bad. Especially when you're flying over an ocean and the sun is going down.
Okay, so help me understand this. If Taylor was wrong about where they were, what did he actually think was happening? I mean, you're looking down and basically seeing water everywhere. How do you convince yourself you're in one place when you're actually somewhere completely different?
Well, that's exactly the problem. Taylor apparently believed the flight was somewhere around the Florida Keys, south of the mainland. But one of the leading explanations is that they were actually much farther east, over the Bahamas. And, from the air, especially with worsening weather and limited visibility, islands can be surprisingly difficult to identify. So if Taylor looked down, saw islands, and convinced himself they were the Florida Keys, then suddenly his whole mental map was wrong.
Oh, wait a minute. So if he thinks he's over the Keys, he's going to choose a direction based on that location. But if he's actually over the Bahamas,
Then the same direction could take him farther out over the Atlantic.
oh, wow. Yeah, okay. Now I see the problem. And the other pilots are following him because he's the flight leader.
Exactly. Although here's where it gets interesting. Some of the radio traffic suggests that at least some of the other pilots weren't completely convinced. There were discussions about which direction they should fly, and that's one of the most frustrating parts of this story. Imagine sitting in one of those other cockpits thinking, I don't think we're going the right way. But you're also flying over open ocean. Your own position isn't completely certain, and the person leading the formation is an experienced pilot.
Yeah, because what do? Break formation and just hope you're right? That's a pretty terrifying decision either way.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the clock is working against them. It's getting later. The weather is deteriorating. Radio communication isn't perfect. And most importantly, they're burning fuel.
Right, and, I'm guessing they didn't have enough fuel to just keep flying around until somebody figured it out.
No, eventually, they were going to have to come down. And Taylor apparently understood that. One of the instructions associated with the flight was essentially that when the first aircraft dropped to around 10 gallons of fuel, the entire formation would have to ditch together.
Wait, together? You mean all 5 planes would deliberately go into the ocean at the same time?
If they couldn't reach land, yeah. The idea was to keep the formation together so the crews would have a better chance of surviving and being found. But here's the problem, Sam. These weren't calm, perfect conditions anymore. The seas were becoming rough. It was getting dark. And ditching a heavy aircraft into rough ocean water is incredibly dangerous.
So even if they survived hitting the water, now they're out there at night, in rough seas, waiting for somebody to find them.
Exactly. And that's one of the most haunting possibilities in this entire story. Because we don't actually know whether the Avengers crashed because they ran out of fuel, whether they attempted a controlled ditching, or precisely where they came down. At some point that evening, Their radio signals simply faded away.
You know, when you explain it like this, it actually sounds less supernatural, but somehow it doesn't sound any less scary.
I think it's scarier.
Really? Why?
Because if there's a mysterious force in the Bermuda Triangle, you can tell yourself this was some bizarre event that couldn't happen under normal circumstances. But if the real explanation is disorientation, bad weather, fading daylight, and running out of fuel, then there's no monster in this story. There's just a group of men who may have realized, little by little, that they weren't going to make it home.
Yeah, okay. That's actually worse.
And remember, their families still didn't know any of this. They were waiting. The Navy was searching. Everyone was hoping that maybe the crews had ditched somewhere and would be found alive. But as the hours passed, then the days, that hope started disappearing.
So, what did the Navy eventually conclude? I mean, after searching all that water and finding no confirmed wreckage, they had to come up with some explanation.
They did. And this is where something happened that would become incredibly important to the Bermuda Triangle legend. The investigation initially pointed toward navigational error and Taylor's confusion about the flight's position. But that wasn't the end of it.
Okay, what changed?
The official conclusion eventually became cause unknown.
Oh, yeah. I can already see how that became part of the legend.
Exactly. Because, there's a really big difference between saying, we don't have enough evidence to know exactly what happened, and saying, something happened that cannot be explained. Those sound similar, but they're really not. And over the years, those two ideas became very easy to confuse.
Right. Because once people hear cause unknown, they're probably not thinking, well, there just wasn't enough evidence. They're thinking, okay, something weird happened out there.
Exactly. And once that idea takes hold, well, that's when a tragic military accident starts becoming something else entirely. It becomes a mystery, then a legend, and eventually, part of something much bigger.
The Bermuda Triangle.
The Bermuda Triangle. But here's the thing, Sam. When Flight 19 disappeared in 1945, people weren't sitting around talking about some mysterious place called the Bermuda Triangle, the way we do today.
Wait, really? So the Bermuda Triangle wasn't already this famous thing?
Nope. And that's where our story is about to change. Because now we're not just asking what happened to Flight 19, we're asking something completely different. How did a section of the Atlantic Ocean become one of the most famous supernatural mysteries in the world?
Yeah, because now I'm wondering, if people weren't already calling it the Bermuda Triangle in 1945, then when did that whole idea actually start?
Well, this is where the story gets really interesting. Because the name came later. In 1964, a writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article that grouped Flight 19 together with other disappearances and gave the region this dramatic name, the Deadly Bermuda Triangle.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty good title if you're trying to get somebody's attention.
Exactly. And once you give something a name, people start seeing connections that maybe they didn't notice before. Suddenly, accidents that happened years apart, involving completely different ships, different aircraft, different weather conditions, could all be presented as pieces of one giant mystery.
So instead of looking at each accident separately, people started thinking, wait, maybe all of these things are connected.
Right. And then about 10 years later, the legend really exploded. In 1974, Charles Berlitz published a book called The Bermuda Triangle. It became a huge bestseller. Millions of copies were sold, and suddenly the triangle wasn't just an aviation or maritime mystery anymore. It became part of popular culture.
And I'm guessing that's where we start getting Atlantis, aliens, all that stuff?
Pretty much. Stories about strange energy fields, lost civilizations, extraterrestrials, distortions in time and space. The whole thing just kept growing. And here's the problem, Sam. The more dramatic the story became, the easier it was for the original facts to get buried underneath it.
Yeah, because let's be honest, pilot gets disoriented and runs out of fuel isn't going to sell nearly as many books as Mysterious Force Swallows 5 Navy Planes.
Exactly. And eventually somebody decided, you know what? Let's actually go back and check the records.
Where did that?
A researcher named Larry Kusch. And what I like about Kush is that he didn't start by trying to prove some new theory. He basically said, okay, what do the original documents actually say? He went back to Coast Guard reports, maritime records, old newspapers, contemporary accounts, the kind of boring research that doesn't make for flashy television, but actually tells you what happened.
And let me guess, he found some problems.
A lot of them. Kush found cases where important details had been left out, accidents described as mysterious even though severe weather was involved, and disappearances that had been linked to the Bermuda Triangle even though they didn't actually happen or the story claimed they did.
Wait, so some of the famous Bermuda Triangle stories weren't even inside the triangle?
That's what the research showed in some cases. And that's when the whole mystery starts changing. Because now the question isn't only, what happened to these ships and planes? The question becomes, how much of the legend came from what really happened? And how much came from the way the stories were told?
Hmm, that's actually a much bigger question.
It is. And to answer it, we have to look at one of the biggest disappearances ever attached to the Bermuda Triangle legend. Not a small boat, not an airplane, a United States Navy ship more than 500 feet long, carrying 306 people.
306.
Yeah, the USS Cyclops. And when that ship vanished, there wasn't a single confirmed survivor. Yeah, 306 people. And when you hear a number like that, it really puts the scale of this disappearance into perspective. The USS Cyclops wasn't some little fishing boat that got caught in bad weather. This thing was enormous, more than 500 feet long, operated by the United States Navy. And in March of 1918, it simply vanished.
Okay, wait. A Navy ship that big disappears with more than 300 people aboard, and nobody knows what happened to it?
That's basically the mystery. The Cyclops had been transporting a heavy load of manganese ore from Brazil. It stopped in Barbados and then headed toward Baltimore. Now, here's something important. The ship wasn't in perfect condition. There had reportedly been concerns involving one of its engines, and it was carrying a very heavy load.
Okay, so already we've got some possible explanations. Mechanical trouble, a heavily loaded ship.
Exactly. And that's why, just like with Flight 19, we have to be careful not to start with the supernatural explanation. But here's what makes the Cyclops so fascinating. No distress call was received, no confirmed wreckage was recovered, and there were no confirmed survivors.
306 people. Just gone.
Yeah, and imagine being one of their family members. You're waiting for this massive Navy ship to arrive, and it doesn't. Days go by, then more days, and there's no message telling you exactly what happened. No wreckage that gives you an answer. Nothing.
That's something I'm noticing with these stories, Tom. The part that makes them so powerful isn't necessarily that something impossible happened. It's that there's no ending. People don't know what happened. And sometimes our imagination comes up with a much more interesting explanation than, a storm or mechanical failure.
Oh, definitely. And the Cyclops attracted all kinds of theories. Maybe it encountered severe weather. Maybe there was a structural failure. Maybe the cargo shifted. Some people even wondered about sabotage because this was during World War I.
What about a German submarine? 1918. That's the first thing I would have thought.
And people absolutely considered that possibility. But German records examined after the war didn't provide evidence that a U-boat had sunk the Cyclops. So once again, you have theories, but no definitive answer.
Okay, but let me play skeptic for a second. Just because nobody found the wreckage doesn't automatically make this a Bermuda Triangle mystery, right? The ocean is huge.
See, now you're thinking like an investigator.
Oh, don't sound so surprised.
Fair enough. But you're absolutely right. The Atlantic is enormous. And especially in 1918, finding a ship that went down without transmitting its exact location could be incredibly difficult. And that's one of the biggest problems with the Bermuda Triangle legend. Sometimes we never found it slowly turns into it vanished without explanation.
Those aren't necessarily the same thing.
Not at all. But here's where the Cyclops story gets even stranger.
Okay, every time you say that, something bad happens.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. But listen to this. Years later, two ships closely related to the Cyclops, the USS Proteus and USS Nereus, also disappeared in the Atlantic during World War II.
Wait, sister ships?
Yeah, and both were carrying heavy loads of ore when they disappeared.
Okay, that's weird.
It certainly sounds weird, but it may also give us a clue. Because if three similar ships carrying heavy cargo all disappeared, maybe the mystery isn't what's hiding in the Bermuda Triangle.
Then what is it?
Maybe the ships themselves are trying to tell us something.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Because now you've got my attention. Three related ships disappear. They're all carrying heavy cargo. You're saying that might actually point away from the Bermuda Triangle?
Possibly. Think about it this way. The Cyclops and her sister ships were massive vessels designed to carry bulk cargo. And when you're transporting thousands of tons of something like manganese ore, how that weight behaves matters. If the cargo shifts, if the ship develops structural problems, or if you combine a heavy load with rough seas, suddenly you've got a situation that can become dangerous very quickly.
Oh, so the fact that similar ships disappeared might not mean they encountered the same mysterious force. It could mean they shared the same vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And that's the kind of explanation that doesn't sound nearly as exciting as some mysterious energy field, but, you know, it makes sense. The Cyclops was also reportedly dealing with engine trouble. Add that to a heavily loaded vessel crossing the Atlantic, and there are several perfectly ordinary things that could have gone terribly wrong.
But here's what bothers me. If something catastrophic happened, wouldn't there be something left behind? Lifeboats, debris, cargo, something?
You'd certainly hope so, but the ocean doesn't always cooperate. Currents move debris, storms scatter it, wreckage can sink. And remember, we're talking about 1918. Search technology was nothing like what we have today. If the Cyclops went down quickly in deep water, finding the exact location would have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I guess we're looking at this through modern eyes. Today, we've got satellites, GPS, emergency beacons.
Exactly. None of that existed. And that's something we have to remember with a lot of these older Bermuda Triangle stories. Losing contact with a ship 100 years ago meant something very different from losing contact with one today.
Hmm. So maybe part of the Bermuda Triangle mystery is actually technology, or the lack of it.
That's a really good way of putting it. And there's another factor people sometimes underestimate: the environment itself. This part of the Atlantic can experience powerful storms, rapidly changing weather, strong currents, and of course, hurricanes.
Okay, so we've got storms, currents, human error, mechanical failure. Tom, you're really trying to kill the Bermuda Triangle for me.
I'm not trying to kill it. I'm just saying the ocean is already dangerous enough without giving it supernatural powers.
Uh-huh. That's exactly what somebody trying to kill the Bermuda Triangle would say.
Okay, fair. But here's where I'll give the mystery some credit. Even when you have reasonable explanations, there are cases where we still don't know exactly what happened. And that uncertainty is real. The mistake is assuming that because we don't know the answer must be something extraordinary.
Right. Unexplained doesn't automatically mean unexplainable.
Exactly. See, you're getting good at this.
Getting good? Excuse me, I've been carrying this investigation.
Okay, we're going to talk about that after the show.
I'm just saying.
Anyway, there's another famous disappearance that really tests this whole idea. Because this time we're not talking about a Navy ship during World War I. We're talking about a passenger aircraft flying from Puerto Rico to Miami in 1948.
Okay, how many people were aboard?
32.
And I'm guessing they never made it to Miami.
No, the aircraft was a Douglas DC-3. Its registration was NC-16002. And shortly before it disappeared, the crew reportedly believed they were getting close to their destination.
Oh no. Don't tell me they disappeared when they were almost there.
That's exactly what happened.
Almost there? Okay, see, that's what makes these stories creepy. If they were somewhere way out over the Atlantic, that's one thing. But you're telling me they thought they were getting close to Miami.
That's what makes this case so interesting. It was December 28th, 1948. The aircraft was a Douglas DC-3, flying from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Miami. There were 29 passengers and 3 crew members aboard. But before we turn this into another supernatural disappearance, there were problems before the airplane even left the ground.
What kind of problems?
Well, its batteries were reportedly low. There were issues involving the aircraft's electrical system, and the pilot was advised that repairs should be made before departure.
Wait. So they knew the plane had electrical problems, and they still took off?
Yeah, and that's one of those details that changes the way you look at the whole story. The flight did leave San Juan and continued toward Florida. For much of the trip, things apparently seemed relatively normal.
Relatively normal. I don't like the way you said that.
Neither do I, because during the flight, communication problems became an issue. And here's where things get interesting. At one point, the crew transmitted a message indicating that they were roughly 50 miles south of Miami.
Okay, 50 miles? That's close. So they should have been.
They never arrived.
Wow.
No confirmed wreckage, no confirmed survivors. 32 people disappeared with the aircraft.
Okay, but something doesn't add up. If they were really only 50 miles from Miami, wouldn't somebody have found something?
That's the question. But there's another possibility. The crew may not actually have been where they thought they were.
Navigation error?
Possibly, weather conditions and winds along the route may have affected the aircraft's actual position. And with communication and electrical issues complicating things, investigators had several factors to consider.
So when the pilot says, we're 50 miles from Miami, that doesn't necessarily mean they actually were.
Exactly.
Okay. Because when you first told me that, I pictured this airplane practically reaching Miami and then.
Just vanishing right before it got there?
Exactly. Yeah. See, that sounds completely different from possibly being lost over the ocean.
And that's our first lesson in how these legends grow. A small detail can completely change the way a story feels. The aircraft vanished while approaching Miami sounds mysterious. But once you start asking whether the crew knew their exact position, suddenly there are other possibilities.
You know what I'm starting to realize? The Bermuda Triangle might be two different mysteries.
Okay, explain that.
There's the mystery of what actually happened to these ships and airplanes. But then there's another mystery. How these individual disappearances became this one giant story about a place where things supposedly vanish.
Sam, that's exactly where I was going.
I'm carrying the investigation again.
Oh, we're bringing that back now.
I'm just pointing it out.
Okay, Detective Sam. But you're right. Because here's where the story we're investigating takes a major turn. The disappearances themselves happened over many years. But the idea that all of them belong to one mysterious phenomenon, that came later.
So, when did people actually start calling it the Bermuda Triangle?
That's where things get really interesting. Because the ocean didn't name the Bermuda Triangle.
People did.
Exactly. And once the name existed, people started looking backward through history for mysteries to put inside it. Exactly. People did. And this is where the Bermuda Triangle story gets, honestly, kind of fascinating. Because sailors weren't navigating around for centuries with maps that had some big, ominous triangle drawn on them.
You mean there wasn't a little warning that said, hey, maybe don't go through here?
No mysterious triangle on the map. In fact, the phrase Bermuda Triangle didn't become popular until the 20th century.
Okay, so who came up with it?
Well, stories about strange disappearances in that general part of the Atlantic had already been circulating. But in 1950, a journalist named E.V.W. Jones wrote about a number of mysterious disappearances involving ships and aircraft in the region.
So we're already a few years after Flight 19.
Exactly. And then, in 1952, Fate magazine published an article by George X. Sand that brought several of these incidents together under this idea of a mysterious area at sea.
So people are starting to connect cases that originally weren't necessarily connected.
Right. And then we get to 1964. A writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. And that's where the term Bermuda Triangle really enters the story.
So that's the guy.
He's generally credited with coining the term. And think about what a powerful name that is. Bermuda Triangle. It sounds mysterious before you even know what supposedly happened there.
Oh, absolutely. If he'd called it like that slightly concerning part of the Atlantic, we probably wouldn't be doing this episode.
That's true. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Not even close.
But seriously, once you give something a name, something interesting happens. Suddenly, separate events can start feeling like pieces of the same puzzle.
Flight 19, the Cyclops, the DC 3,
Different years, different circumstances, different kinds of vessels.
but now they all have one thing connecting them: the Bermuda Triangle.
Exactly. And then the story exploded in the 1970s.
What happened?
A writer named Charles Berlitz published a book called The Bermuda Triangle in 1974. It became enormously popular and helped introduce the mystery to a huge audience.
Okay, so this is when the legend really takes off.
Big time. And Berlitz didn't just talk about bad weather or navigation mistakes. The Bermuda Triangle became connected with much more extraordinary possibilities.
Ah, here we go. I've been waiting for this part.
I knew you were.
Give me the weird stuff, Tom.
Okay, depending on which stories you read, people proposed everything from unusual magnetic forces to time distortions,
Okay.
extraterrestrials.
Yes,
I knew that would get you.
I'm just keeping an open mind.
Very open, apparently. And then there's probably the most famous supernatural explanation of all.
Which is?
Atlantis.
Wait, Atlantis.
The legendary lost civilization itself. Some believers suggested that remnants of advanced Atlantean technology, or some mysterious source of energy beneath the ocean, could energy with ships and aircraft.
Okay, I'm the one who's supposed to be open-minded here, and even I'm gonna need a little more than that.
Good, because evidence is where things start getting complicated.
Why? What happened?
Because while books and television programs were turning the Bermuda Triangle into one of the world's greatest mysteries, another researcher started going back through the famous cases.
Checking the original stories?
Exactly.
And I'm guessing he found some problems.
A lot of them. His name was Larry Cush, and instead of beginning with the legend, he started checking things like weather reports, newspaper accounts, Coast Guard information, and the details surrounding individual disappearances.
And?
Some of the stories weren't quite as mysterious as they'd become in the retelling. In some cases, important details had been left out. In others, the circumstances had changed as the stories were repeated.
Oh, so now we're investigating the investigators.
Exactly.
Detective Sam is back.
I knew that was coming.
You walked right into it.
But this raises a much bigger question. If some of the Triangle's most famous stories changed as they were retold, how much of the mystery belongs to the Atlantic Ocean?
And how much belongs to us?
That's exactly what we're going to find out. So, Sam, we've heard the disappearances. We've heard the legends. We've even got Atlantis thrown into the mix.
Don't dismiss Atlantis yet. I'm still holding on to that one.
I knew you would. But now I think we have to ask the boring question.
Which is?
What does the evidence actually say?
Okay, fair enough. Because if this area really is different from the rest of the ocean, there should be something we can point to, right?
Exactly. And one of the claims you hear all the time involves compasses. You know, ships enter the triangle, the compass starts behaving strangely, navigation goes haywire.
And suddenly nobody knows which direction they're going.
Right, it sounds terrifying. But compass behavior isn't quite that simple. Magnetic north and true north aren't exactly the same thing, and the difference between them varies depending on where you are.
So a compass behaving differently doesn't automatically mean there's some mysterious force underneath the ocean.
Correct. Although I realize that's much less exciting.
Considerably less exciting, Tom.
I figured you'd say that.
Okay, what about the weather? Because we've mentioned storms a few times now.
And that's important. This part of the Atlantic can experience powerful thunderstorms, tropical storms, hurricanes, rough seas, conditions that can change quickly.
And we're talking about some incidents that happened decades ago, when forecasting and navigation weren't what they are today.
Exactly. And there's something else moving through the region that matters. The Gulf Stream.
Okay, why does that matter?
Because it's a strong ocean current. If an aircraft crashes or a vessel sinks, floating debris can be carried away from the original location. That can make search and rescue operations much more difficult.
Hmm. So when people say they searched and never found anything,
That sounds mysterious, and sometimes it genuinely is. But the absence of wreckage doesn't automatically mean the wreckage vanished.
you know, I'm starting to see how this happens. You remove one or two details from a story, and suddenly it sounds completely different.
That's exactly what Larry Cush argued after researching many of these cases. His conclusion was essentially that the Bermuda Triangle's reputation had been built partly through exaggeration, mistakes, incomplete reporting, and stories being repeated without checking the original circumstances.
Okay, but hold on. I don't want to let you completely destroy the mystery here.
I was waiting for the objection.
Because explaining how a story got exaggerated isn't the same as explaining what happened to every missing person.
No, and that's an important distinction.
Flight 19 still disappeared. The Cyclops still disappeared. Those 32 people aboard that DC-3 didn't magically come home because somebody found problems with the legend.
Exactly. Skepticism doesn't give us all the answers. It just changes the questions we're asking.
Hmm, I actually like that.
What?
That maybe we don't have to choose between the Bermuda Triangle is supernatural and there's nothing interesting here. People really disappeared. Families really lost people. And in some cases, we genuinely don't know exactly what happened.
And that's something I don't want us to lose sight of. Behind every famous triangle story were real people, not characters in a legend.
Yeah.
But there's still one question we haven't answered.
What's that?
Are ships and airplanes actually disappearing inside the Bermuda Triangle more often than they disappear in other heavily traveled parts of the world?
Oh, okay. Now that's a good question.
And the answer might completely change how we look at this mystery.
Okay, so what's the answer? Are more ships and airplanes actually disappearing inside the Bermuda Triangle?
Well, this is where the legend runs into a pretty big problem. Because according to organizations that have actually looked at the region, there's no convincing evidence that mysterious disappearances happen there more frequently than they do in other large, heavily traveled parts of the ocean.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously.
Okay, hold on. We've just spent all this time talking about missing planes, missing ships, hundreds of people.
And all of those tragedies are real. I'm not saying they didn't happen.
Right, but you're saying the pattern might not be what we think it is.
Exactly. And that's a really important distinction. Think about how much traffic moves through this part of the Atlantic. You've got ships, commercial aircraft, private aircraft, recreational boats, people traveling between the United States, the Caribbean, and islands throughout the region.
Oh, so if you've got a lot more traffic, you're naturally going to have accidents.
Right. If millions of people drove through one giant intersection every year, eventually you'd have a lot of accidents there. That wouldn't necessarily mean the intersection was cursed.
Depends on the intersection.
Okay, fair point. I've driven through a few that might qualify.
Exactly.
But here's something else. The U.S. Coast Guard doesn't recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a special geographic hazard. And NOAA says there's no evidence that mysterious disappearances happen there more often than in other large, heavily traveled areas of ocean.
Hmm, that's actually pretty damaging to the supernatural argument.
It is. And even the boundaries of the Bermuda Triangle aren't officially defined. Different writers have drawn the triangle differently.
Wait, seriously? There's not even one official triangle.
Nope.
Tom, you're telling me we've got mysterious disappearances happening inside a mysterious triangle, and nobody can completely agree where the triangle is.
When you put it that way,
I'm just saying.
but that's actually important. Because if you can change the boundaries, you can potentially include more incidents in the story.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
And there's another thing I find fascinating. Ships and aircraft don't routinely avoid this region because of some mysterious danger. People travel through it constantly.
So you're telling me people are flying through the Bermuda Triangle right now,
All the time. And ships sail through it too.
and they're not getting sucked into another dimension.
Most of them seem to be doing just fine.
You're really enjoying destroying this for me now.
A little bit.
But you know what? I still don't think you've completely killed the mystery.
Why not?
Because statistics can tell us the triangle isn't unusually dangerous overall, but they still can't tell us exactly what happened to Flight 19, or the Cyclops, or every person who disappeared without an answer.
And that's where I agree with you.
Wait, you agree with me?
Don't sound so shocked.
I'm documenting this moment.
Please don't. But seriously, saying there's probably no supernatural Bermuda Triangle doesn't mean every individual disappearance has been solved. Some haven't.
So maybe we've been asking the wrong question.
What should we be asking?
Not, is the Bermuda Triangle real? Maybe the question is, why do we want it to be real?
Hmm.
Think about it. We've got perfectly reasonable explanations for a lot of this stuff, and yet people still want Atlantis, aliens, time warps, something hiding under the ocean.
And maybe that's the final mystery we need to solve.
Why we're so fascinated by the unexplained?
Exactly.
You know, Tom, after everything we've gone through, I think I understand why people want the Bermuda Triangle to be real.
Why?
Because the normal explanations are almost too normal. Bad weather, navigation mistakes, mechanical problems, human error. You hear those things and you're like, okay, sure. But then somebody says a ship disappeared because of some strange force underneath the ocean.
And suddenly, you've got a Netflix documentary.
Exactly.
I knew where you were going with that.
See, we're getting good at this.
But let's actually rank some of these explanations. Bad weather,
Completely believable.
hurricanes,
Obviously.
navigation mistakes, and human error,
After Flight 19, yeah, definitely possible.
mechanical failure,
Absolutely.
the Gulf Stream carrying wreckage away before search crews can find it,
Yeah, that makes sense too.
aliens.
I'm not ruling them out.
Sam.
What? You asked me.
Okay. Atlantis,
I'm gonna need some evidence.
time portal.
Hmm.
Oh, come on.
I'm kidding. Mostly.
Mostly. That's reassuring.
Okay, but there is one theory we haven't really talked about much. What about those stories about methane coming up from underneath the ocean?
Yeah, that's one of the more unusual natural theories. The idea is that a large release of methane gas from beneath the seafloor could theoretically affect the density of the water and create dangerous conditions for a vessel. But there's a big problem. There's no solid evidence showing that methane eruptions explain the famous Bermuda Triangle disappearances.
So, scientifically possible things and things we actually have evidence happened are not necessarily the same thing.
Exactly. And that's a distinction we've been running into throughout this entire investigation.
What about giant waves? You know, those rogue waves people talk about.
Rogue waves are absolutely real, and under the right conditions, the ocean can produce extremely dangerous waves. The Gulf Stream can also interact with weather systems and rough seas in ways that make conditions especially nasty. But again, saying something could happen isn't the same as proving that's what happened in a particular disappearance.
Which brings us right back to where we started.
How so?
We can explain a lot of the Bermuda Triangle, maybe even most of it. But we can't sit here and tell somebody exactly what happened aboard every missing ship or inside every missing airplane.
No, we can't.
And, I don't know, maybe that's enough mystery for me. I don't necessarily need aliens or Atlantis anymore.
Wait, did Samantha just give up Atlantis?
I said I don't need Atlantis. I didn't say I'm giving it up.
There she is.
Nice try.
But I think you've actually landed on something important. The real ocean is mysterious enough. It's enormous, it's powerful. And even with all the technology we have today, there are still things beneath it that we haven't fully explored.
And sometimes, people disappear.
Yeah, and when they do, sometimes we're lucky enough to eventually learn what happened. Sometimes we're not.
So where do you stand now? After everything we've looked at, do you believe in the Bermuda Triangle?
Hmm. You know what? I think I'm going to save my answer.
What? After all this?
Yep.
Oh, you're terrible.
Because I want your answer too. And I think we should give them both at the end.
Okay, final verdicts?
Final verdicts.
Okay, final verdict. I came into this wanting the Bermuda Triangle to be this place where something genuinely strange was happening. And, part of me still does. But after everything we've looked at, the weather, navigation problems, mechanical failures, the Gulf Stream, and the way some of these stories changed over time, I don't think we need a supernatural explanation for most of it.
Wow. I was not expecting that answer from you.
Hey, don't celebrate yet. I said most of it. Because there are still cases where we don't know exactly what happened, and that's the part I can't completely let go of. When an airplane or a ship disappears and nobody can tell me with certainty what happened to the people aboard, there's still a mystery there.
And I actually agree with you. My verdict is that I don't see convincing evidence that the Bermuda Triangle itself is some supernatural zone. I think we're looking at a heavily traveled part of the world where accidents, violent weather, human mistakes, and mechanical failures have happened. And then, over decades, some of those tragedies became connected into one enormous legend.
But you still can't explain every case. Flight 19 still disappeared. The Cyclops still disappeared. And there are families who never got a definitive answer about what happened to the people they lost.
No, and I don't think we should pretend that we can. Because these weren't Bermuda Triangle stories when they happened. They were real people who left home and never came back. Maybe that's why the legend has survived for so long. The unknown makes us uncomfortable. We want an answer. And when there isn't one, sometimes we create one.
A storm isn't quite as exciting as a time portal.
Definitely not.
And for the record, I'm still not completely giving up Atlantis.
I knew it. I knew you were going to make it through the whole episode.
Listen, I'm just saying, if somebody finds Atlantis tomorrow, I expect an apology.
Deal. I'll apologize on the next episode. But until then, maybe the most frightening thing about the Bermuda Triangle isn't that something supernatural is hiding there. Maybe it's knowing that sometimes people can disappear, and the ocean doesn't give us an answer.
Okay, that's actually creepier. And whether you believe in the Bermuda Triangle or think the whole thing is one enormous legend, thanks for investigating it with us.
And if there's a mystery you think Sam and I should investigate next, we'd love to hear about it.
Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones without an ending.
Keep questioning what you think you know. Until next time, this has been Mysteries Unanswered.
A Haunting Horror Tales original.